Previously on my video, you shouldn't be excited for Venom Let There Be Carnage. I genuinely don't think I'm asking for a lot from this sequel. I'm literally asking for good writing, a consistent story, actual character development for Venom, and turning Venom into an actual anti-hero for reasons that make sense. Like, I want this movie to make me hate the fact that Venom is successful at the end, because then I know this movie is doing the right thing in terms of actually making an anti-hero. It's gonna be fun to look back at this video when I make a Venom 2 review when the movie finally releases and see whether I was actually onto something or if I was clearly asking for way too much and the movie lets me down. Well, looks like I was asking for too much, huh? I tried to warn everyone. I tried to tell every single person who was excited for Venom Let There Be Carnage that this sequel wasn't going to be good. And yet, here we are. After waiting for this movie to reach digital storefronts and streaming services, considering I refused to sit in theaters for this movie, I finally sat down to watch Venom 2, and it is not good at all. The story is weak, the storytelling is half-assed, the pacing is way too quick, the movie is incredibly dark visually, and the jokes are trying way too hard. Nearly every single thing I wanted out of this movie, outside of one specific thing, was essentially thrown out the window. Why? Because Venom 2 prioritized being this type of superhero movie. And it is so fast that you can barely register half of the story this movie attempts to throw at you, because by the time you do process it, 10, 15, 20 minutes fly by and the movie's onto something entirely different. While I don't fault the movie for trying to not overstay the welcome, it could have easily had another 20 or so minutes added to the overall runtime. This would have allowed Venom 2 to breathe and do a better job at achieving what it's trying to achieve. Despite the fact that I have a whole list of things I want to rant about, let's start off by talking about the one thing that works for me in this film. In my first Venom video, which yes, I'm going to be referencing a lot for the sake of the conversation, I mentioned that Venom needed actual character growth. Venom's sequel needs to have good character development for both Venom and Eddie. There needs to be some level of growth outside of the buddy cop chemistry they had in the first movie. Don't get me wrong, I don't blame them for capitalizing on that chemistry, because it was arguably the one thing that worked in Venom. However, we need to see more than that. Thankfully, this is the one thing that Venom Let There Be Carnage manages to achieve. In the first movie, Venom is basically comedic relief. He is making you laugh because he's constantly acting weird since, you know, he's an alien. In Venom 2, there's a fairly decent focus on giving Venom depth beyond this comedic relief. There's even a big moment where Venom confronts and humbles Eddie because he feels used. Venom is the reason that people praise Eddie after finding the bodies that Cletus Cassidy left around for people to find. Even though this movie tells us that Eddie is a fantastic journalist, the only moment we see Eddie being that journalist is when Venom is helping him. Honestly, Eddie kind of forgets that, and this leads to them separating for some time in the movie. Of course, they end up setting aside these differences and get back together since, you know, they have to defeat Carnage and wrap the movie up. Admittedly, this is refreshing, but not for the reason you may expect. It's not refreshing because it humanizes Venom, it's refreshing because it showcases that Sony was capable of making Venom more than a comic relief character. In the moments where Venom is being serious and giving life advice to Eddie in Venom 2, that's where Venom shines the most in my opinion. Not when he's laughing, not when he's making corny jokes, not when he's complaining about needing to eat. It's when he's displaying his alien intelligence. The fact that Venom was able to immediately draw everything Cletus drew on his wall in the prison nearly immediately was super interesting. It kind of made me think, oh shit, I didn't think Venom was capable of doing something like that, and then it hit me. Venom 1 did a terrible job at reminding us that Venom is an alien symbiote who has more talent than being comedic relief. Sure, the movie emphasized how much of a loser he is, but that doesn't matter because he's on Earth. What matters is that he's an alien that has way more talent than any of us know because it only pops up when it's needed. Is Venom randomly showcasing these talents when it's randomly needed considered to be terrible storytelling? Absolutely, I think so. Does it admittedly work in the context of the moment though? Yup, I think the hard truth is that we have to accept that these interesting things will only pop up when the movie needs it, and it sucks. It sucks because it'd be so nice to know the exact potential Venom has as an attempted anti-hero slash villain. It'd be so helpful to know Venom's exact skill set, but I could see the perspective of what's the fun in knowing everything from the get-go, let it pop up when it needs to pop up so the viewer can get excited when that moment happens. Regardless, those scenes are the only moments or things that work for me in Venom Let There Be Carnage, which now brings me to my long list of problems with this movie. Firstly, let's start with my problem with Cletus Kasady as an antagonist. In Venom 1, the post-credit scene has Cletus calling Eddie Brock for an interview. For some reason, he's obsessed with Eddie, but we don't know why, and that curiosity of why does Cletus have an obsession with Eddie never actually gets answered. Despite Cletus saying there's gonna be carnage,
there's gonna be carnage.
He doesn't have the symbiote at the beginning of Venom 2. He's just a serial killer, which is easy to kind of ignore because that whole trait is more spoken than shown, who has a specific obsession with Eddie, an obsession that barely gets explained. Cletus states that he's obsessed with Eddie because he knows of his upbringing and knows that they're quote unquote the same, but it's never shown how he got those details. He simply has them, and we're supposed to accept it as a fact. Also, there's no real information about Eddie's childhood until that moment, and even then, it's hard to buy what Cletus is saying. Plus, there's also the whole Cletus is a lunatic and we shouldn't really be buying into the nonsense he spews, I guess. Then again, for a majority of Venom 2, Cletus is either obsessed with Eddie for half-assed reasons or overly focused on breaking out his childhood love streak from this random place called Ravencroft. There is no in-between, and it's hard to take him seriously because there's no real moment that Cletus feels like a threat. I'd even go as far as to say he doesn't feel like an actual serial killer either, but whatever. The point I'm trying to make is that Cletus doesn't work as an antagonist since there is no real connection to Eddie Brock. It just happens to be something that the movie wants us to buy, just like they want us to buy how Cletus ended up getting Carnage. Cletus gets Carnage after Venom attacks him, and Cletus tastes Eddie's blood, and when he gets stuff injected into him, Carnage is born. That's it. Despite this being a simple idea, there's no real explanation as to why it actually happened. Is it because of the combination of events? Is it because he tasted Venom in Eddie's blood, which simply needed an agent like the stuff being injected into him in order to give birth to Carnage? Is it simply because of the tasting of said blood? Okay, look, I know I'm asking way too many questions, but I feel like someone should be asking them. There's also this weird thing where Carnage calls Venom his father, but we don't know why either. He just does. And I guess you could reach and say, well, technically, Venom did give birth to him by doing what he did, but that reach is longer than Michael Jordan's arm in Space Jam. On top of this, apparently Carnage can hack into computers as well, and no, I'm not bullshitting you if you've never seen Venom 2. Cletus grabs a computer and Carnage literally connects himself to the computer and hacks into a database with his own red and black themed UI. I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. This is the actual truth. What I'm trying to highlight, or the point I'm trying to get at, is that this movie lives and dies by the philosophy of if the plot needs it, the plot gets it, just so we can get from point A to point B. While sometimes that is perfectly fine, especially in superhero focused movies, it doesn't work in this movie. It doesn't work because this movie, once again, suffers from the same core problem of Venom 1, which is inconsistent storytelling. It's even highlighted when Venom says something along the lines of, "Oh shit, he's a red one," when he faces Carnage in the final confrontation, like that's supposed to mean something important. A moment like that is the prime time to explain the emphasis on why Carnage being a red one, whatever that means, is super important. Explain it to us. Tell us why we should care about Carnage being a red one. Tell us how that puts Eddie and Venom in a lot of danger, or at least have 2 moments to set this up. One moment is Venom meeting Carnage earlier on. He could have said that same line earlier, and then a secondary scene later on in the movie that showcases Venom making his way to the final fight. As he and Eddie are getting to that fight, this moment is the moment that Venom could have given us a few lines of dialogue about the different type of symbiotes on his planet. That way, it builds up the intensity of the final half-ass fight and at least makes us semi-care about the possibility of Venom and Eddie losing. It's frustrating, it truly is. Once again, things like this absolutely highlight how good Venom 2 could have been had they simply let the movie breathe, which brings me to my next problem. This movie's pacing is way too fast. It's like every single time you think you'll be able to take in what the movie's attempting to do, Venom 2 is automatically redirecting your attention to something else. It's all gas, no brakes. This sequel feels like it's focused on one thing, not overstaying its welcome. And while Venom 2 doesn't overstay its welcome, this sequel feels like it's afraid of its viewers caring about it. It's almost like it wants you to not do that and simply watch it with your brain turned off, which admittedly works for these types of movies. However, the viewers of the Venoms and Morbiuses of the world are the same people who are keeping themselves up to date with stuff like the MCU and DCEU. They're the same audience that is willing to buy into long-term visions, built-up concepts, and more importantly, put the time into theorizing about the upcoming future. Why would you not want to capitalize on that audience? Why would you be afraid of trying to create something worth paying attention to and worth consciously thinking about when that is the exact thing the audience for these movies does? It makes no sense to me at all. Venom Let There Be Carnage is so focused on getting in and getting out that those moments in the movie that should feel like they have weight to it don't. To give a few examples, Eddie and Venom getting back together after being separated for a majority of the movie is incredibly awkward. It's trying so hard to be funny that it feels ridiculously forced and almost makes you not want to laugh at it. This movie emphasized the importance of Shriek being saved by Cletus without having any real build-up at all. The movie literally cut straight to Ravencroft, and next thing you know, Cletus and Carnage are there and break her out. By the time you even process that he's breaking her out of Ravencroft, they're already running away on a joyride, and you're just like, oh, okay, I guess? The final fight lacked any sort of actual build-up because Eddie and Cletus barely have any connection to one another, so they're fighting each other feels like it has to happen more than it should be happening. Meanwhile, Carnage and Venom barely share the screen together, and when Carnage finally dies, it's not even because Venom saves the day. Shriek is the reason Venom and Eddie defeat Carnage and Cletus. It's not even because Venom and Eddie become a good team or anything like that. In comparison to Venom 1, Venom Let There Be Carnage lacks any level of depth or sense of urgency, and while yes, Venom 1 has a vision that's entirely butchered and has points within the movie that were clearly cut out, there's still something there that's trying to be achieved. Unlike Venom 2, where the simple idea of we want Venom to fight Carnage doesn't feel like a cohesive vision, because not only is so much missing to make this storyline interesting, but Venom and Carnage barely fight or interact throughout this movie. Now that I've gotten all of that out of my system, let's move on to the third issue I have with Venom Let There Be Carnage. It's time for Eddie Brock to no longer be a bumbling fool. It's time for growth. It's time for character development. And it's time that he finally acts like an actual human being. I'm just gonna be straight up, this iteration of Eddie Brock sucks. He isn't funny, he isn't entertaining, he isn't an interesting protagonist, and he isn't likable at all. I know I said this in my original Venom 1 video. On top of this, the movie doesn't even follow a core component of an anti-hero, which is making the viewer watch a character that is designed for them to hate as they save the day at the end of the movie. Venom 1 doesn't have that, nor does it even have an anti-hero. If anything, Eddie and Venom just feel like unimportant, meaningless comic book characters. They don't feel like heroes, they don't feel like villains, and they don't feel like anti-heroes. They just feel like regular characters for the plot and nothing more. Unfortunately, I still feel the same exact way with Venom 2. There is barely any depth to Eddie Brock. I know these movies want us to feel like Eddie's this complex character, but he isn't. On one hand, these movies want us to believe that he's a talented journalist. On the other hand, he's entirely incompetent, and it's like these movies entirely forget that he's supposed to be smart. He's just thrown all over the place, and it's like, can we just get a single direction for this guy already? Can you just decide whether Eddie and Venom are meant to have some sort of consistency already? This ambiguity doesn't work at all because nothing in any of these movies is written with any sense of cohesion. Venom 1 wants you to believe that this dude's life is being torn apart because Venom changed his life. Venom 2 wants you to believe that Eddie is this overly shitty dude to this alien symbiote, and he has to learn a lesson so he can appreciate Venom and then go save the world or whatever. However, neither of these premises land because neither of the movies are good. While it is trying to get from point A to point B, these movies forget to support both of their premises with some sense of cohesion and consistency. So going from Venom 1 to Venom 2 is supposed to feel like a smooth transition, but it doesn't. We're basically at a crossroad with these characters, and it is time for a clear direction to be shown. It is time for Sony to decide whether Venom and Eddie are going to be anti-heroes or actual heroes, because if they don't, Eddie is going to continue to be this awful protagonist with no clear moral compass or actual depth that none of us will care about. And if Venom 3 doesn't redeem these problems like Venom 2 should have done, that makes me beg the question, will this iteration of Venom ever be redeemable? Look, Venom has come and gone, and while that movie did suck, it sucked because it had some assortment of ideas that you could see trying to take their form, but were clearly cut somewhere along the lines. This prevented Venom from having a consistent movie from start to finish. Unlike Venom 2, Venom 1 had some potential to actually kind of possibly be good. Venom Let There Be Carnage has now come and gone. While this movie should have been the beginning of Venom's redemption arc in terms of actually being a good superhero movie, it was somehow worse than its predecessor. Its pacing is too fast, there's no sense of importance for this story, Eddie still sucks, Carnage was incredibly disappointing as an antagonist, and there felt like no real reason for this movie to exist beyond money. I say that because this movie didn't really achieve anything beyond getting Eddie and Venom alone on an island because they feel the need to isolate themselves since they don't think they're good people anymore. Though that didn't make sense because they've never really shown us beyond 1 or 2 times that Eddie and Venom are willing to make morally questionable decisions that have a potentially negative impact on others. In the worst ways possible, this movie capitalized on the worst aspects of Venom 1 and forgot how to be a good sequel that actually sets these characters up for success. Despite achieving its core goal, trying to make this movie as short as possible so people could get in and get out without a second thought, this movie forgot to do the things that make us care about the MCU and DCEU. While dumb fun superhero movies existing is perfectly fine, characters like Eddie Brock and Venom have way too much significance to Marvel fans. They absolutely deserve better, especially if Sony plans to do something major with these characters crossover-wise in Sony's Spider-Man universe. At the end of the day, this movie sucks, and I was right about this movie probably being disappointing. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you really enjoyed this video, hit that sub button. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, write a comment down below. Don't forget to keep it real with peace, love, and positivity.